Mike, how are you this morning?
Yeah, I'm doing great, buddy. How are you?
I'm doing okay. I'd like to know the lead story for Pro Football Talk.
Oh, wow. There's a lot going on right now. Nothing that really is the huge, far and away top story. I'm encouraged that Commissioner Roger Goodell is convening a group of blue ribbon experts to figure out what a catch is in the NFL. I think the NFL gets criticized for being tone deaf on too many issues because it is. This is one where it's refreshing that the commissioner recognizes there's a disconnect between what the fans see and what the rule book says, and to the extent that they can harmonize those two things, everybody's going to be better off.
Well, we had Dean Blandino on yesterday, the head of officials, and I don't think he helped his cause here. When you say you have to have the catch that for a certain amount of time and your feet in bounds, they just keep adding to now a time commitment here, Mike. Why are they making it more complicated?
Well, they're not making it more complicated. It's always been complicated, and as different examples happen, we realize just how complicated it is. This all came from the reaction to the Bert Emanuel play in the 1999 NFC Championship game when Tony Dungy was coaching the Buccaneers. Emanuel caught the ball. He had both hands on it. The ball hit the ground. It was called incomplete. They tried to come up with a way to allow the ball to touch the ground and yet the pass still be complete. And that's where this whole going to the ground, the ball touches the ground, you keep possession through the act of going to the ground, that's where this all came from. And they've been struggling over the last 5 or 6 years to properly interpret and apply it and also have the formulation of a rule that makes sense to everyone. And I just think they need to go back to square one and construct a rule that meshes with when we see it, like the Des Bryant catch in the divisional playoff game at Lambeau Field. We all saw it. We all believe it's a catch. The rule needs to make it a catch. As currently written, the rule says that's not a catch. The rule needs to be written in a way that makes plays like that a catch.
If I'm listening in Los Angeles, what do I need to know and when do I need to know it about the NFL playing there again?
Well, you need to know you may be buying season tickets for somebody before too long if you're inclined to go to the games at wherever they're going to be played until they have a new stadium. In January, a vote's going to happen. Now, the question is, can they work something out between now and then in the back room among the owners so that somebody, the Chargers and the Raiders, or the Chargers and the Rams, or the Rams and the Raiders, or only the Chargers, get the approval necessary to go to L.A.? And that's the challenge because they have the 75% supermajority requirement. You got to have 24 owners support this. So all it takes is 9 to block it. And where it stands right now, Dan, Dean Spanos, the owner of the Chargers, has at least 9 votes to block Stan Kroenke, the owner of the Rams, and Stan Kroenke has at least 9 votes to block Dean Spanos. So they got, Roger Goodell's got to play the role of Mo Howard and get everybody in a room, start clunking heads together, and figure this out. And that's a dangerous territory for him because there's a chance you come away from that process with some enemies. And, that's his main constituency, keeping those 32 owners happy. So he needs to find a way to tiptoe through this one and work out a deal. Otherwise, they're going to go to this meeting in January. They're going to cast a few ballots. They're going to realize they don't have 24 votes for anything, and they're going to go home.
If I put you on record of saying football in Los Angeles, 2016, 2017, 2018, first year.
I still think it's going to be 2016, but they got to work it out by January. There is a chance they kick the can one more year. They come up with a deal where something to get Kroenke and Spanos together in Inglewood, and you pay Mark Davis, the owner of the Raiders, enough extra money so he can build a stadium in Oakland, because it's going to be very difficult now for Stan Kroenke to lure the Chargers to partner up with him when the Chargers and the Raiders have a signed agreement together to build a stadium in Carson. I mean, if Al Davis were alive, he'd already have filed the lawsuits against anyone and everyone trying to break up that marriage. So it's not going to be easy to unbundle that relationship, but I think the best way to solve this is Chargers and Rams, in Inglewood, with the Raiders getting a big pile of money from someone to build a stadium in Oakland, and the challenge is, can they work all that out in the next month or so?
Is Mike Pettin in trouble in Cleveland?
Oh, I think he is, and I think that's one of the reasons they're hanging on to Johnny Manziel, because Mike Pettin's done with Johnny Manziel, but if the Browns are done with Mike Pettin, there's a chance they're going to have a coach next year that wants Johnny Manziel. So I think Pettin's in trouble, and we'll find out when the dust settles whether or not Jimmy Haslam, the owner of that team, decides to move on and hire a new coach.
How many head coaching vacancies do you think there'll be?
Well, there's usually 6 or 7. somebody was telling me recently there could be as many as 14, but there's no way that's going to happen because what happens is some of the bad teams are going to beat up on other bad teams, and they're going to be good enough that those coaches get a chance to come back. I mean, look at the Lions. Jim Caldwell has turned it around enough in recent weeks that there's a thought now that he's going to come back. But, I could see as many as 8 or 9. That's the beauty of the NFL from the standpoint of the folks who cover it. You've got these teams that cannibalize each other. For every good team, there has to be a bad team. And the owners look around and say, well, if I just hire the right coach, I go from being 2-14 to going to the playoffs in 1 year.
Jason Garrett's not in trouble in Dallas, is he?
No, he's not in trouble. He just got a new contract after the 2014 season. And there's a coexistence there. He puts up with Jerry Jones. There aren't many coaches who would put up with Jerry Jones, and I think that's one of the reasons why Garrett is going to stick around over the long haul. He tolerates Jones, and Jones knows it, and so Jason Garrett, he's been through worse seasons than this one, and this year, it's the injuries are what has really contributed to that team underachieving.
I know that the NFL executives like to talk about this. The TV executives like to talk about this. When you have the drawing card with a lot of these teams, we know Pittsburgh does well. We know that Dallas Cowboys do well. Green Bay Packers do well. Carolina Panthers, what kind of draw would they be come playoff time as far as must-see TV?
Well, if they're unbeaten, they become a huge draw. Now, if they lose a game down the stretch, then I don't think they're quite as compelling. I mean, it feels like the Panthers and the Cardinals are destined to meet somewhere at some point in the postseason. That's really not a sexy game nationally. And if anything, the Cardinals have more of a following nationally now because they've been good the last few years, and a lot of kids out there glomming onto the Cardinals. And that's really how you develop that national following. It's sustained success over a period of multiple years, and people start to latch on to you. And if the Panthers are unbeaten, then it's a huge story. If they're not unbeaten, they're bigger than they were going into the season, but I don't think they're up at the level with the Patriots and the Packers and the Cowboys and the Steelers.
He's Mike Florio from Pro Football Talk. Before I let you go, this is must-see TV for me tonight, that not only Green Bay having to win, but also that Rodgers looks like the old, Aaron Rodgers here. What do you make of what has happened following a 6-0 start?
Hey, here's what amazes me, Dan. You've got Aaron Rodgers on at least one, maybe two occasions in the last week calling out young players on the team publicly. Mm-hmm. With whatever he said to Chris Collinsworth in the production meeting before the Thursday night game against the Bears, then the press conference on Sunday where he's talking about how the young players aren't preparing enough. You think Peyton Manning or Tom Brady's ever had to go public and complain about lack of preparation for anyone on that team? These are things that get handled internally. They get handled quickly. They get nipped in the bud. And there's been something that's festered in Green Bay this year to the point where Aaron Rodgers has to use that almost nuclear option of going public and calling these guys out. And I want to see how these guys respond to him. Are they going to have buckled down this past week and be ready to go? Or are we going to see that same lethargic performance that we've seen 4 out of the last 5 games?
But you respect that from Rodgers, who is more that cerebral, keep to himself, I lead by example than I do by words.
Yeah, but, remember last year in Chicago, one of the big knocks on that team, there's no one leading by word. Who's leading by word in Green Bay? You can get away with being the leader by example if there's someone else in the locker room who's the enforcer when it's time. If these guys are playing too many video games, somebody's got to take a sledgehammer to the console and say, here's your playbook, play with this. You're not playing video games. You're going to study your film, and you're going to get ready to play. And if Rodgers isn't wired to do that, they need somebody on that team who is.
Well, Clay Matthews, what about him?
Oh, he needs to be doing it. Somebody needs to give him a sledgehammer.
Thank you, Mike.
All right, bye.
That's Mike Florio.